Please, don't be concerned about Pete. My dad would have told me everything we needed, and I would have been president once my mum retired or passed away. Something was jotted down. Until the marital issues arose, that was never questioned, and that the card would be unintelligible to you. So you preferred not to have a lawyer present or to enter into a contract because you wished to. You are identified as Ahab in the recording by Tom Callahan. What God would have given you is what you desire, but you require it immediately. Yes, I understand. No, I did not. Yes, I understand. So what else would you like to share? I had zero interest in it. Providing a hand to my mum made me happy. Yes. You have just seen the film that validated Jonathan Lamb's prediction that he would succeed Daystar as president. Things got out of hand, though, once Doug Weiss was involved. Also, this isn't your average argument between relatives. This type of deceit is absolutely abhorrent. Envision yourself as the heir apparent, having been assured by your creative and devout father that you will continue the family tradition. All of that is considered trash after his death. Throughout his life, Jonathan had been devoted to the church, learning and growing, until he learned that his own father had different views. Doug Weiss, who was in the right place at the right time, was the subject of these thoughts. Not just any thoughts. With this case, there was absolutely no hope. This was not an impromptu decision. It was all part of a bigger plan. Where does Jonathan stand? Joni and her new friend betrayed his father's promises. This reminds me of the biblical account of Esau and Jacob. Since he was the firstborn and the rightful owner, blessing Esau was appropriate. But what really transpired? Jacob hid the present from his mother and stole it. Someone else is stealing what should have been Jonathan Lamb's from Esau. Where is the distinction? A bowl of stew was offered to Esau in return for his right to be king. Jonathan maintained his unwavering resolve. He was deprived of it. All right, now we can move on to Doug Weiss. Oh, I don't even know where to start. He poses as a Christian advisor, but his deeds reveal otherwise. Folks, you may have noticed that dogs disguised as sheep have been spotted before. In Christian circles, Doug Weiss gained a reputation as an authority on overcoming sex addiction, to be honest though. This man became very successful despite his imperfections. Typical of manipulators, he seized opportunities when they presented themselves. He improved the situation. In pursuit of Joni Lamb, he divorced his wife of over 30 years, who had supported him through thick and thin. Tell me what you know. He was fantastic. She was vulnerable, which allowed him to win her trust. He was fully integrated into Daystar and her life before anyone could blink. However, we must not pretend that Doug Weiss is faultless. What he did was completely obvious to him. He seized the opportunity as soon as he saw it. Joni, the trap had her in its grasp. The events here are very similar to those in the biblical account of Delilah and Samson. Because God had selected Samson, he had a great responsibility. But he did fall for the wrong woman. How did that happen? She tricked him into giving up his authority, which ultimately led to his demise. This is just a rerun of what happened before. There is only one Doug Weiss and one Delilah. But this time it's not just one person's power that's being destroyed. An entire heritage is. For the sake of time being, let us discuss Joni Lamb. Now we can all be truthful. For a long time she was thought of as Daystar's gentler, more compassionate side. What kind of care, though, fails to consider the final desires of the man who created it all? Not many pastors were like Marcus Lamb. He beheld an object. Up until the very end, he made his point crystal clear. Daystar was going to have a new president in Jonathan. What Joni didn't care about was his desires. She chose to disregard them. She veered off the road that Daystar should have taken because it benefited her and Doug Weiss more. This reminds me of King Saul, you know. A kingdom, dominion, and power were among the many gifts God bestowed upon him. He sought to do what God wanted him to do, but his ego and pride prevented him. How did that happen? He had lost all he owned. Truthfulness and doing her husband's bidding were Joni's responsibilities. However, she decided to take matters into her own hands, just like Saul. What transpired is well known to all. Why are you so mean to the people closest to you? When a new man enters your life, how can you possibly disregard your husband's memory? Plus, it wasn't merely a case of nostalgia. She did this to maintain her dominance and guarantee her victory every time. Even though he was the legitimate heir, Jonathan Lamb was a nuisance. Also, Joni was careful to shove him aside. Let me clarify, all will be rectified. The truth will always be fought by some. Even when people attempt to conceal, manipulate, or distort the truth, it will eventually emerge. A planted seed appears to be what it is. No amount of covering it with dirt will stop it from sprouting. That is the essence of reality. No matter how hard you try, you just can't escape it, and it refuses to budge. Regarding the current dispute over Daystar Television and Jonathan Lamb, I'm also certain that the truth will emerge. It was my assumption that Jonathan Lamb would head Daystar. He will find his place. I have no doubt about it. No amount of deceit, manipulation, or trickery can alter God's plans. Today may not be the day. Perhaps tomorrow isn't the best day. The reality, however, will emerge. When things go wrong, those whose fortunes are based on seats will be the ones to pay the price. It's not as simple as wishing, though. Someone else came up with the idea. Because God's plan is too great to be thwarted, many people in the Bible who were wounded, abandoned, or abused yet rose again consider Joseph's narrative. His brothers believed they had finally gotten rid of him when they sold him into slavery. They foolishly believed he would never rise to fame or pose a challenge to their position, since they had already sealed his destiny. However, God's plans were different. Years of transgression, treachery, and adversity befell Joseph. But he did, in the end, become Egypt's ruler. The brothers who had wronged him were about to starve to death when they knelt before him in a mixture of humiliation and desperation, unaware that he could rescue them. The narrative of Joseph serves as a strong reminder that human beings are powerless to impede God's will. From a terrible situation, God brought good. There is still more to Jonathan Lamb's story. Similar to Joseph, he has also been wounded by deceit, treachery, and injustice. The church he had helped found, Daystar, expelled him because of the damage to his reputation. Have faith in me, though. Jonathan will rise to his feet again. His opponents will have to face the music when he speaks up, because they attempted to silence him, discredit him, and force him out. Following in the footsteps of Joseph's brothers, they too will face the repercussions of their actions. Nothing here has to do with seeking vengeance or retaliation. Following God's will and acting morally are the crux of the matter. However, it is imperative that we remember the broader context here. There is a world of difference between the drama in one family and a power struggle within a ministry. Responsibility, honesty, and the significance of adhering to moral standards are at the heart of this. A mission's foundation should be trust, honesty, and faith. They are meant to be havens where individuals can receive assistance, recover, and discover optimism. But we must denounce leaders who disregard these principles and prioritize their personal interests over those of the people. Who will step up and help if we don't? Holding your leaders accountable is an essential part of being a Christian. We will not turn a blind eye to malfeasance, cruelty, or deceit, regardless of the power or prominence of the perpetrators. A voice must be raised in protest of wrongdoing. It is important to speak out against injustice when we witness it. The integrity of each ministry isn't the only thing on the line here. Keeping the faith unadulterated is the aim. How we respond to these kinds of challenges teaches those outside our church a lot about who we are. The story of Jonathan Lamb teaches us that doing the right thing can be costly. Doing the right thing, even when it hurts, demands courage, focus, and conviction. On the other hand, it teaches us that fighting for justice is always worthwhile. It is worth it to fight, resist, and endure criticism, since the truth always comes out on top. It will be very costly for those who sought to damage Jonathan's reputation, silence him, or expel him from the group. In the end, they will all be freed by facing the truth. Remembering the significance of grace is important as we reflect on this situation. We must demand accountability from our leaders, but we must also be forgiving and compassionate. This in no way indicates that you condone or ignore injustice. It entails coming to terms with the fact that we are all fallible, make mistakes, and require forgiveness. Doug Weiss and Joni Lamb, along with everyone else involved in this incident, have the opportunity to make amends and be forgiven if they so desire. To get there, though, you have to start by being a responsible and honest person. At this time, we ask that you keep Doug Weiss, the Daystar residents, Jonathan, Susie, Joni, and everyone else in your prayer. We can only pray that the truth is revealed, that justice is served, and that individuals recover. The victims of abuse, coercion, or unfair treatment need our prayers for solace, strength, and restoration. Every Christian should be modest enough to be helpful when asked, and courageous enough to fight for what they believe in. The time you have given me today is greatly appreciated. Consider the consequences of liking, sharing, and subscribing to this show. Keep in mind to always look out for one another. Post your thoughts in the comments section. Have you any opinions? Does what Jonathan Lamb says hold water, or is there more to the tale? Finally, this impacts multiple households and places of worship, so let's have a conversation about it. Justice, honesty, and the firmness of our religious convictions are at the heart of the matter. Defending it is worthwhile.